Hi there, I'm Fabricio Albuquerque, a graduate student at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Norte in Brazil. In this study, I investigate the representativeness of coral diversity in Brazilian marine protected areas. I had the contributions of my supervisors, Guilherme Longo and Míriam Pinto, and my lab colleague, Jessica Bleuel. Well, marine protected areas, MPAs, are an essential strategy to promote marine biodiversity conservation worldwide. Some work indicates that these locations can maintain more coral cover and fish diversity, with positive effects even near large urban centers. Currently, there are more than 70,000 MPAs around the world, covering more than 27 million square kilometers. This number, however, represents only a little more than 7% of the oceans under protection, which is less than 10% proposed by the achieved targets by 2020. When we consider only no-take MPAs, we have only 2% of the oceans under protection. So in this graph, we can see that the increase in the coverage of MPAs has occurred in recent decades, especially since 2010, when the 10th Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity took place, and the achieved targets were established. To achieve this target, several nations have created MPAs focusing on quantity rather than quality. In Brazil, for example, the coverage of MPAs increased from 1.5% to 25% through the controversial creations of 4 large MPAs that disregarded scientific information in 2018. So, although it has achieved the international target, the country has followed the global pattern, which is to create large MPAs in remote locations of low economic interest. This means low representation of coastal ecosystems such as coral reefs. The Brazilian network of MPAs is organized in 2 protection types: strict protections that can only have indirect use of the reserves, and sustainable use where the exploitation of natural reserves is allowed. The Brazilian MPAs are under different management jurisdictions: federal, state, and municipal. Marine protected areas are designed to mitigate local impacts such as overfishing, pollution, and tourism on species that are subject to these pressures. In the case of corals, mitigating this impact is essential to ensure the species resilience, as bleaching and mortality events have become more frequent and intense due to increased ocean temperatures. In this figure, we have a schematic of bleaching phenomenon, with corals expelling the zooxanthella as a function of increased temperature. The Brazilian coral fauna is different from the other regions of the world, like the Caribbean and the Coral Triangle. We have only 22 species that are important reef builders. However, we have a high rate of endemism. 30% of the species are endemic. Brazilian corals are distributed from the plume of the Amazonas River to the Albuquerque Biological Reserve in the state of Santa Catarina. The Brazilian coast can be divided according to the characteristics of the reefs into 4 regions. The North region is the poorest in corals. In the northeast, corals begin to become more abundant, with most of them closer to the coast. This region also includes some oceanic islands and the only atoll in the South Atlantic. The east region has the richest and the most abundant corals in the South Atlantic. The main reef formations are found in this region, such as the Abrolhos National Marine Park and the Todos os Santos Bay. In the southeast region, the main reef formations are found in the Arraial do Cabo Extractive Marine Reserve and in the Arvoredo Biological Reserve. Thus, considering the distribution of Brazilian corals and the arrangement of MPAs along the exclusive economic zone, we investigated the representativeness of shallow water ocean-related clarictinian corals and radiocorals within Brazilian MPAs, integrate information on species occurrence, richness, and endemism with MPA's location, extension, types, strict protection or sustainable use, and management jurisdiction, federal, state, or municipal. To investigate the representativeness of corals in MPAs, we used the occurrence database for 22 species of shallow water ocean-related corals, 19 clarictinia, and 4 radiocorals taken from the study by Bleuel et al. This database was assembled from an extensive literature review, comparing information on the location and endemism of the species. Here are the main genera of coral reef buildings in Brazil. Most of them have slow and massive growth. And here, the endemic species, 4 sclerotinia corals, all from the genus Mucismilla, and 3 radiocorals, all from the genus Millepora. To evaluate the richness and endemism in MPAs, we overlay the species occurrence points with the limits of MPAs and extracted the information for each type and management jurisdiction. Additionally, we are able to estimate the amount and the extent of MPA network that include corals. We find that the sustainable use MPAs represent largest number and cover greater extension of sea surface than strict protection ones. The surface extension is clearly influenced by the 4 large MPAs created in 2018, which cover oceanic islands that harbor some coral species. And as you can see, there are an equal number of endemic species in both types of MPAs, with the sustainable use MPAs harboring greater richness. Looking at management jurisdiction, we can observe that the federal MPAs of sustainable use are the ones that cover the largest extension with high levels of richness and endemism. Another important factor to observe is that there are no occurrence records of corals in MPAs under municipal jurisdiction. Next, we analyze the probability of coral occurrence in the MPAs. Are these areas in suitable location for corals? To answer these questions, we use the occurrence probability projections implemented through Bayesian hierarchical spatial models in the study by Bleuel et al. These models make correlations between biological and environmental data and have the advantage of extrapolating biological data to places with little sampling. 8 environmental variables and the occurrence data of the 22 coral species were used in the projections. As a result, we have a matrix layer with occurrence probability for the full range of the Brazilian species. The next step was to conduct a gap analysis to assess whether the MPA's network covers sites with suitable probabilities of occurrence. We overlaid the occurrence matrix with the limits of MPAs and extracted the values for entire MPA network, then for types of protection, and finally for different management jurisdictions. In this graph, we can see that the MPAs are in place with a high probability of occurrence in relation to the entire Brazilian coast. The blue line indicates the lowest probability value for coral occurrence recorded in our database. In this other graph, we can compare the probability of occurrence between types of MPAs and observe that both are in suitable location. However, sustainable use MPAs present higher frequencies. Looking at the management jurisdiction, we observe that in the strict protection MPAs, both federal and state management include high probability values, as do the sustainable use MPAs, although the state management MPAs have higher frequencies. It is also interesting to note that using the occurrence projection, some MPAs over municipal jurisdiction showed good probability values. Thus, we can conclude that although the extent of the MPAs that protect coral is large, it's not representativity, since most of this extent is the 4 large reserves created recently in remote locations. The MPAs are in locations that harbor high diversity and endemism, which is important as many of these high diversity locations are under strict protections that can mitigate local impacts. And most importantly, although MPAs include places with high probability values, the sites with the highest frequency of occurrence are in sustainable use and under state jurisdiction. This means that the most suitable locations for occurrence of species can be inefficient for the conservation of corals, considering that this type of MPAs is more permissive to the use of natural resources and receive less fiscal incentives due to state management. This study is important because understanding the representativeness of coral diversity among different types of MPAs can inform actions to enhance their effectiveness. I would like to thank the Federal University of Rio Grande do Norte and the Graduate Program in Ecology, where the Marine Ecology Laboratory is located, to thank the Coordenação de Aperfeiçoamento de Pessoal de Nível Superior for funding the participation in this event, and to Serpilheiro Institute for funding this work.